really there to say I envy you and the happiness of having so many children. But after James's passing, I fear that God has deprived me of the pleasures of being a mother. Hope, however, prevails over my fear, and there is, of course, always the possibility of fostering a child. Be that as it may, slandering our family name even further is not something I intend to do. How long has it been?
3 days.
And where may I make my preparations?
I want to use the coach house.
Without wishing to be rude, I must advise against this, sir. You see, a coach house isn't a very suitable place for my line of work.
It'll be the coach house.
As you wish. Is there any visible trauma?
Tea?
No, thank you. Considering the time frame, it's best if we move quickly. This is to certify that the convalescence of melancholy necessitates the use of alcoholic tonics. The patient will engage in a dormant period of bed rest with brief intermissions of fresh air.
Scarlet fever. You asked me if there was any visible trauma to the body. There isn't. It was scarlet fever.
I'm sorry.
You mustn't mind her. She's a bit confused. She's been acting queer for weeks now. And Dr. Davies tells me she's melancholic. Nothing too serious. Well, she frets all day. It's exhausting, really. I do apologize. I shouldn't burden you with this. Would you join me? I assume you have some more questions.
Will you sit down?
It is
I know
useful
it's unseemly to speak about these matters with a stranger such as yourself. However, I read your husband's obituary in the paper. Now, I have these terrible pains in my chest sometimes, you see. As if someone has thrust a knife in my heart. I know you understand.
Of course.
Are you sure you don't want some? I believe there's a cup in that cupboard over there.
No, thank you. I truly think it's best if I start unpacking.
I'm paying you a good deal of money for this, madam. Surely a little light conversation isn't too much to ask of you. Let us chat for a while. Women like chatter, don't you? Was your husband a good man? Did he treat you well before he passed?
He was the most wonderful man I've ever known.
And you truly loved him?
As a matter of fact, I did.
Do you have children, Mrs. Thompson? I don't mean to intrude, it's just...
No, do not trouble yourself. We wanted to. But
Tragic. So tragic. However, maybe it's for the best. Have you ever heard the penetrating cries of a child? You never realize just how loud they are. Until you... You're right. We should get on with it.
is it possible that I can speak to your wife before we start?
Absolutely not. He's become hysterical. There would be nothing to gain from that conversation. You'd be wrong to draw any hasty conclusions. I did try to prevent this.
Mr. Harris, please.
When she dismissed the servants in a fit of hysteria, I took her to a physician the best money could pay for. Gave her all the brandy in the world. But she just... I told her to stop her nonsense at once. Told her to drop her silly notions. Take better care of the child. I told her to get more sleep, that a rest would set her right. It didn't matter. My wife, being the stubborn cunt she is, couldn't even manage to do that. You know, it took her 6 weeks to finally stop bleeding. I should have known then that woman was never meant to be a mother! I chose my wife poorly, Mrs. Thompson. I chose her poorly, and it breaks my heart.
Are you finished? I would like to start setting up now. There is still a lot of work to be done.
Don't get this twisted, madam. You do not dictate anything on my grounds. Do you understand? Masquerading some sort of businesswoman doesn't change the fact that you're merely a childless widow with a fancy toy. Nothing more. Teapot is in the kitchen. Now pour yourself a cup and get to work.
Good morning, Mrs. Harris. How are you feeling? You are aware it is not necessary to be veiled. I understand it is important for you to have this photograph taken in this location. Now, due to the lack of light in this room, the exposure will take approximately 2 minutes. It is important that you keep absolutely still during this time, or the photograph will not take correctly. Do you think you can do that for me? Sit perfectly still. I'll be right behind the camera, keeping a close eye on the time. Just relax. It will be over soon. It's not a problem. I understand this must be very difficult for you. Shall we try again? Just as I said before, I will keep an eye on the time. Please sit as still as you possibly can until I say otherwise.
Mrs. Harris?
Please, Alice, please stop crying. Stop crying.
Mrs. Harris, please try not to distress yourself.
Why do you judge me?
Mrs. Harris, I would never judge you.
Why won't anyone listen to me? I listened.
I think it's best if you...
Alice, why are you crying like that? Is it bath time, my sweet?
Mrs. Harris, who are you talking to?
Shall I fill you a bath? One as pleasant as I lay her in the bath. But the crying won't stop.
Mrs. Harris, I beg of you!
I push till the water runs over her mouth and up her sweet little nose. She smiles at me. She smiles at me as I watch the bubbles leave her mouth. One by one. I don't want to struggle anymore. Not anymore. Your house is on fire and the children are gone. Stop crying. Please come back. Please stop crying. Stop crying!
For God's sake, aren't you finished yet? I just can't get him to stop crying. Francis. Francis! He takes after his mother, hysterical to a fault. See, that's how you're supposed to do it. It's not that difficult. only try harder.
I could take him. I could take the burden off of you.